16th agenda session. Now call this meeting to order. Could I have approval of the minutes, please?
So moved. Second.
Okay, with no objection from the council, minutes will stand as recorded. This afternoon, ordinances first reading. We have one item under planning. Madam Clerk, go ahead and read that, and then I think Councilman Ledford has some comments on that.
An ordinance to amend Chattanooga City Code, Part 2, Chapter 38, zoning ordinance so as to rezone properties located in the 7,000 block of Shallowford Road and 2301 Rivendale Lane for R1 residential zone and RTZ residential townhouse 0 lot line zone to RTZ residential townhouse 0 lot line zone for the entire site.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a very productive 4-hour meeting on this Saturday. Both parties, the developer and the HOA, have asked me to move this forward another 2 weeks to March 30th while we work through one last item dealing with stormwater. We need a response from them. So I will be making that motion tonight at 6 p.m.
Okay, very good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate your work on that. Now moving down to resolutions. Madam Clerk, let's read 7A, please.
A resolution authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into a premises use agreement with Tennessee River Soccer, doing business as North River Soccer Association, in substantially the form attached for use of the soccer facility on a portion of tax parcel number 119HA003.01 for a term of 4 years with annual rent of $1.
All right. Councilman Mitchell, you good?
Yes, of course.
All right, great. 7B, please.
A resolution authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into a premises use agreement with Lakeside Youth Association, Inc. in substantially the form attached for the use of the athletic fields and buildings located on Swan Road, tax parcel number 129CA018, for a term of 4 years with annual rent of $1.
Councilman Gilbert.
Okay.
Very well. 7C, please.
A resolution confirming the mayor's appointments of Sarah Page and Chris Sands to the Chattanooga Downtown Redevelopment Corporation Board.
Any questions? 7D, please.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to apply for and, if awarded, accept the Bloomberg Philanthropies 2021 Global Mayor's Challenge for the HCD Ed Connect program for an amount not to exceed $1 million.
Any questions? Very well. Council, if you would pull up your purchasing questions or purchasing items for this afternoon, and let me know if you have any questions or concerns about any of these items.
While folks are looking, Mr. Chair, there are some things on the agenda that weren't printed here in Public Works, and that we went over them last week, though, so they're not on this agenda, but they will be on the council meeting agenda this evening at 6 o'clock.
Okay. Having said that, are there any questions or comments concerning any of those items that will be on the agenda this afternoon? Okay, I'm seeing no hands. Purchasing questions, Councilman Gilbert.
Are you referring to it's on our agenda for 6 o'clock meeting?
Yes, just a meeting today, March 16th meeting.
Okay, thank you. No question.
Okay. All right, I'm hearing no purchasing questions. Let's move to our March 23rd agenda. Are there any questions or concerns about any of these items for our March the 23rd? Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, our special call meeting today will be strictly about, well, there'll be a little bit of an update on the recidivism, but that special call meeting is going to mainly deal with the Vegetation Ordinance. We do have a regular Public Works and Transportation meeting next week, the 23rd, but I think that there might be some questions that council members might want to ask today on some of those items on the 23rd. we can handle them right now if you'd like to. We can handle them in Public Works and Transportation. Right now might be the best time.
Well, I think we just go ahead and take, and I think you may be referring to the payment relative to the TVA property, correct? For the firing range?
Yeah, that probably be if we want to do that right now. I think there's some questions that the council person wants to ask about that. That's H, I believe, isn't it?
No, for next week?
Yes. Yes, 7H.
Yes.
That's correct.
And I see the hand I'm looking for, so I'm going to.
Councilman Gilbert.
Thank you, sir. They need to put District 5 on that one too, on H, it's not on there. I had several people call or text about concerns about the firing range. Some is totally against it. They feel like we have dumped a tanker over there and now we're going to dump another project that they opposed. I had some constituents that want to see the detail of the design, the site plan of the firing range. And they also want to demonstrate to see how the noise would affect their area by the potential firing range.
Okay, we have Chief Roddy on the call with us this afternoon. Let's go ahead and bring the chief in, and I think he can help clarify some of these issues that we're having. Good afternoon, Chief Roddy.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, council.
I think you may have heard some of Councilman Gilbert's concerns that the community has about noise, about how it could possibly affect their quality of life. Could you address just a few logistics and maybe a little bit about, and I think maybe one thing that's not clear, this is an indoor firing range.
Yes, sir.
Could you address some of these concerns?
Absolutely, sir. The only outdoor activities by the current design that could potentially be built at this location would be our canine training, which would just be your police dogs, which doesn't produce a lot of noise. It's not going to be barking incessantly. In fact, the majority of times when the dogs are training, they don't bark. They're not supposed to. The only other item that we could potentially build out there is a course that would help our officers drive safer. It helps them understand how to operate a police vehicle. It's not crashing. We're not doing car crashes or squealing of tires in the middle of the night or anything like that. It is a small track that allows us to not only train, but certify as we're required to by post. Everything else other than an obstacle course, which is just general physical fitness, every bit of firearms training will be done in an indoor range facility. There will be no outside firearms activity on this location. So this is the original design that was proposed in the onset of acquiring the 11th Street property that many of you, I'm sure, remember from several years ago, that when we built and designed the first iteration of that, we had long-range rifle training capabilities in that building. As funds and designs changed, that 100-yard capability was taken out of that other range proposal, which made it not effective and would not help us maintain our level of training as a police department. The current design and proposal includes a 100-yard indoor qualification area as well as a regular qualification area. So all firearms activities will be inside of a professionally designed indoor range facility. This wouldn't be, thankfully, I'm not drawing it. We have companies that we have partnerships with that we started back when we started this original proposal. Designing indoor ranges is all they do. The architect, your local architect, whichever one we design with and we have a partnership with, they don't design the indoor range component. It is actually built, spec'd, and designed by an actual vendor who's a professional at building indoor ranges. So if any of the community members have concerns, I hope that that does help them understand that we understand that there's several things nobody wants. NIMBYism, not in my backyard. Nobody really wants a workhouse. Nobody wants a water treatment plant. Nobody wants a gun range. Nobody wants a prison. Well, this is one of the things not many people want in their backyard. However, this is an entire indoor facility. So if they have questions about how much noise pollution that this causes, I encourage them to find any one of the number of indoor ranges that we do have inside Chattanooga or in our area and go stand in the parking lot during their hours of operation. If they know where this proposed site is and they know how far line of sight their residence is from this proposed area, stand that far away from an indoor range. I promise you they won't be able to hear it. These buildings are designed to capture not only any of the hazardous items that comes from firing a firearm indoors in the HVAC and HEPA filtration system, which is required to have on the building and would be in this design. It's also designed to mitigate the noise. There's actual sound baffles and the way the buildings are constructed to capture and not allow as much of that noise to escape the exterior of that building. So if anybody, please do their research. I'm available for any questions if the community needs me to come, or we work towards showing what that proposed site plan looks like right now. The more information, the better. I'm at your disposal.
We do have a couple of hands up. Councilman Gilbert, you want to continue with some?
It is two more that he said that he's be willing to show. I think that the community would probably love him to show them and explain to them in detail what he just said to us, so they make them feel more comfortable with this fire range being in their back door. That's about it.
Okay, our public safety chair, I think, is working on scheduling a community meeting. I saw that he has his hand up. Well, in fact, he's the only one with his hand up now. Councilman Byrd.
Thank you so much, Chair. I truly appreciate it. Chair, quick question. Words like, back door and backyard, do we know approximately how close this range would be to that community or any other communities in the vicinity? I would like to see if the administration or someone can get us with that site plan, a layout of how close this property or these properties are. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the firing range falls in District 8 and the community is on a line in District 5. I'm not sure. If we can get someone to clarify that a little better for us, I could be mistaken. But I would definitely like to just see how it falls in line to that firing range and, how close in proximity it would be.
Chief, I know we've got some rough drawings. I'm going to say rough drawings of the building. Do we have a site plan laid out as to where everything will be on the premises?
Yes, sir, we do.
We do?
Yes, sir, we do.
Is that something that we can share with the community then when the time comes?
I would assume so. Yes, sir. Thankfully, I don't build stuff. I'm just a police chief. So I don't know when confirmations of site plans or what stages that it's able to be released. Honestly, don't have the answer to that. I do know that I have available a site plan on what we preliminarily laid out to make sure that as I've explained to council before, I did not want to move this police department off of its existing range until I knew the new range was going to provide us the same level of training and preparedness. And that's what the site plan has given me. So I can inquire as to whether it's in a format to be released at that point, but I would encourage it. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Mitchell?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, Chief. How you doing?
Good for you.
I'm doing great. Thank you. Do you have an update for us on the price tag on the training center? Most recent?
I do not, sir. I can tell you that there's been some preliminaries on the buildings, but I'm going to say I don't want to give those to you now because construction costs are in flux. So I don't want to sit here and throw a number that may have a little bit of a date attached to it. But when we come back and I'm able to give a site plan, I will work to have those numbers for you as well, sir.
Yeah, and it's a ballpark number we're looking at because we want it to be as top notch as we can make it if we're going to move forward on this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Byrd, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, If you don't mind, Chair.
Go
if,
ahead.
I know Chief Ridey is not he's the chief of police. In Maps department or whoever we have in our department can show us like a pin drop, not really a site plan, like this is a pin drop of the area where it's gonna be, and the property is probably 10 feet or 100 feet or 500 feet away from
Okay.
that. That's what I would like to see.
Okay.
I
All right,
really-
yeah, we can do that.
Thank you.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to switch this question over to Phil. Phil, does this require any type of rezoning process?
I think it has to look, we have to look at what the current zoning is for the property on there. And since it's going to be a public building that is going to be constructed on the property, there has to be a referral to the planning commission just for their input as well.
Okay, I was just trying to figure out, when I hear the word site plan, that usually associates with a rezoning case or a PUD or something of that nature. So I was just wanting to know where we were going with that.
It would be part of your public infrastructure here for the city, and it would have to go through the planning commission in that regard.
Okay, let me ask this question. Would the site plan be tied to the project, or is the site plan a bit flexible if it needs to change?
The main aspect is just the construction of the public buildings that will occur on there. As long as they're located, that would be fine.
Okay, so the site plan is not as we tie it to a PUD, is not going to be there is flexibility in case some unknown factors arise and they need to move a wall or something of that nature.
No, sir, that's not the issue. The issue is just the public construction under the statute has to be subject to a review by the planning commission.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman.
All right, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a number of my colleagues, I've also received a lot of phone calls and text messages, emails, everything else, being close to District 3 as well. And due to some people spreading a lot of misinformation, Chief, it always makes your job and our jobs a little bit harder instead of reaching out to find out the accurate information first. But I guess there wouldn't be as much drama if they did that.
What's the fun in that, sir?
I agree. So thank you, Chief, for coming and explaining that. Mr. Chair, if you just want to see just an idea of what the parcel looks like, I can show you really quick. It obviously doesn't have the site plan, but it does have, I can show you the outline of the parcel if you would like to see it.
Unless the council is ready or needs to see it, I think maybe in the community meeting where the residents can get an idea for themselves. I mean, I think we could address it at that time.
Okay, very well.
Misinformation, that's how, what Councilman Mitchell would say, that's how you release the goats.
Mhm.
Right, sir?
Yes, sir.
All right.
And there are some better at it than others.
Yes,
Absolutely.
sir.
Any other questions for the chief at this time, or maybe another staff member? And this will be again in Public Works Committee next week, correct, Councilman Mitchell?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Chief, maybe at that time we come with a little bit with a shared screen. Maybe we can see the parcel, maybe even have a pin drop at that point.
Yes, sir. I'll get with Bill
Can we do
Payne.
that?
Yes, sir. Bill Payne has been one of the lead POC with Public Works as we work
Okay.
with the project. So Bill and I will get together.
Very good. And maybe a little bit more explanation of what the $100,000 actually covers, what that money's going towards.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Gilbert?
Yes, got a question. Is this time sensitive? Chief?
To my knowledge, no, sir. But I think that's why this has been primarily filed through Public Works. The land acquisition part is really, and not to kick a can into someone else's lane, our primary responsibility was design, and Public Works responsibility was land acquisition, land preparation, site planning, and so forth. Like I said, I don't know enough to answer that question.
Mr. Mitchell, Councilman Mitchell, can you find out, is this time sensitive? The reason I'm asking, if it's not time sensitive, could we not defer this until chiefs meet with the community so they can ease their minds on this project?
Well, that's up to the council. That would be up to the council to process next week. It's on the agenda. I look forward to the presentation, Chief. It'd be up to the council at that point to ask for a deferral.
Right, but I'm asking, can you find out if it's time sensitive?
All right, so you're wanting me to go to Mr. Payne and get on his end of things.
Right.
And see about that. And then is it okay if I bring that to the council meeting, or do you want it before then?
If you can just bring it to the council meeting, that'd be fine.
Okay. All right. I'll tell you what, if I get something before that, Mr. Payne likes to do things in writing, as we all know. And if I get an email from him before next Tuesday, then I will just forward it on to the council.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Council, Justin Steinman has his hand up. I'm assuming with some information. Would you like to hear from Mr. Steinman at this time, or?
Yes.
Or, okay. Madam Clerk, would you bring in Mr. Steinman, please? Good afternoon, Mr. Steinman.
Council, can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. I was just going to answer Councilman's question about the priority. It is time sensitive because we have some outstanding invoices to the Tennessee Valley Authority regarding some of the work that's being done to determine the viability of the property. And so this request is really just an increase for our due diligence costs that we need to pay them as part of the process of determining whether or not this site will be suitable for a law enforcement training center. So we do have several that are outstanding, and we've reached our maximum without council approval for additional funds to pay those TVA invoices.
Okay. All right. I guess we'll get into that a little bit more next week.
Mr. Chair.
Councilman Mitchell.
Yeah, I just want to ask Justin one question. So this is more about still studying the feasibility of the site. Some of these costs of the $100,000.
Yes, sir. And I think 100,000 probably exceeds. Yeah, like it's really just an estimate of what will be needed. It's not a hard number as far as what will be needed for that due diligence process. We just didn't want to have to be coming back to you multiple times for relatively small increases, but it is just an estimate at this time.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Mitchell, I think we'll get into it more next week, but I think what this $100,000 costs is administrative costs, it's legal costs and environmental costs as well, just to get us to the point of making the acquiring the property. There we go.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Madam Clerk, you can excuse our guest.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you all.
Acquisition. All right. I think that covers everything on next week's agenda. Let me get back to, I think we have no departmental reports this afternoon. Future considerations, Council, if you would pull up your future considerations. It's my understanding that everything that is on your future considerations will be on next week's 2-week agenda. Councilwoman Burrs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are you through with the agenda, the 2-week?
For the 23rd, we are. We're now on future considerations.
Right, and we have two things that have not appeared again. One is scheduling the purchasing presentation I wrote you about for Mr. Salmons. Council wanted a report on more streamlining the purchasing process.
Mm-hmm.
And that hasn't been scheduled.
Okay, why don't we schedule that? So we're doing our strategic planning this month on the 9th and the 23rd.
You hadn't decided yet whether you wanted it in strategic planning or a committee. I didn't know how much time it would take.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, why don't we do it in a committee in strategic planning?
Okay,
Let's
All
do that. And
that's
what,
fine.
can you make it, can we do it next week?
Yeah, I'm good. We were just waiting for that, and Councilman Ledford had come in with some very good suggestions as well. The
Okay.
second thing is the Panhandling Ordinance has kind of fallen off, and it goes in our legislative committee. And Councilman Ledford, did you ever pull up those suggestions you had again that you were going to send to Councilman Smith?
Ma'am, I've been focused on the vegetation component, the purchasing that you saw, and a very stressful zoning case in my district over the last
I know.
few months. So once we move past, hopefully, this hurdle, I will be glad to dive back in and finish up my comments on panhandling.
All right, well, Councilman Smith mentioned he was waiting for those, but then I'd like to schedule or reschedule. And again, it's a committee meeting, the Panhandling Ordinance.
That would go back under legislative committee. Though.
Yes, sir, it
Yeah.
would.
Yep.
Okay, let's, Vice Chair, if you'll just let me know when you have all the comments in, and then we'll schedule a committee meeting from there.
That's fine. Do you want to try to do both these pieces at once or do one before the other? I mean, obviously I don't have one of them at all, but
Which are you talking about?
Yeah, when you say both, I thought we were just talking.
well, I
about
thought there was another one that Councilwoman Burrs I thought needed to, but maybe.
that was
Budget finance.
that was just budget and finance. That was a purchasing.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about that one.
No.
No.
Then yes, that's totally fine. As soon as I have the information, I will definitely get it scheduled, Chair.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Councilman Ledford.
On future considerations, if Bill Payne can get with me offline about the MOA with the YMCA and also the mutual aid reimbursement expenses, I can ask my questions offline. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. All right. Let me know if that doesn't happen so that I can make sure that we can get that lined up for you. Councilman Gilbert.
Is this possible next week? Can we learn more about the 311? They have updated the 311. I'd like to know more about it, if it's possible.
Okay. Let me check, and maybe we could do it during a departmental report.
Okay.
Okay. Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. On the administrative notice for the waiving of the fees for Friends of the Festival, do we know if any of their activities include anything for Juneteenth, celebration, music, parade, anything of that nature?
I do not. That is something that we could check with, I guess, Mr. Salmons or maybe Mara. You want me to bring Ms. Sullivan in at this time, or you want to discuss this next week under our 2-week?
Yeah,
When we
we
get
could,
there.
in fact, she could, get with me offline, but I would
Okay.
just, me personally, I would love for them to include something, some kind of cultural celebration for Juneteenth during that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Councilman Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up a little bit with the waiving of the fees. How are those decisions made? I mean, there's a lot of folks that like to use, and I know we're coming out of COVID, so this is great news, but a lot of times we would measure things by hardships to the organization to waive fees. What is our process, Councilperson Burns, what's our process to decide to waive these fees for this organization versus any other organization?
We don't have a process.
Well, I think that's a great question, and maybe I tell you what, let's discuss this a little further unless you're not ready for it to get on the agenda, do you want to put this in a committee or letting it get on the agenda and then discuss it at that point in time? Would that be satisfactory?
I would prefer that we have an open discussion about it because this comes up, Councilman Mitchell's right. This comes up a lot and it's kind of catch can, and I'm not sure that it's even handed. So it may be something that we should discuss as a group.
I agree with Councilman, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Yeah, I totally agree with Councilwoman Burrs because a lot of organizations, what has happened is it's been in a continuation of some of the agreements that has been brought forth in the past and putting on some of this event. And I totally agree that there needs to be some sort of process started that applies to anybody who makes this request. So circling back to what Councilwoman Burrs started, I think we should have an open discussion on how to move this process forward so it is equitable and we know what the requirements are to make this happen.
Mr. Attorney?
Yes, sir.
Let's keep this particular item off of the two-week agenda next week at this time.
All right.
Let me see if I can get some kind of report or committee scheduled to address this this item on a process.
Okay, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep. Okay, anything else under future considerations? All right, if not, council, let me, I did a walkthrough of the council chambers this afternoon, just to go over it again with Mr. Payne and some from IT. It does look like that we're going to have our hybrid up and running by April. One thing I would strongly suggest, and I think it would be very helpful, at least during sort of this transition time, that we suspend our strategic planning during the month of April. We would have to have it in the council chambers anyway. All of our meetings, at least for the near future, will be in council chambers, not back in our conference room. So I would suggest, unless, you know, some council people have some very strong opinions that we have strategic planning during the month of April, we'll be in a transition period anyway. And I think at least starting out during this hybrid period, that it would facilitate a much smoother transition, easier meeting time to suspend strategic planning during this time. Mr. Noblet?
Yes, sir. One item, since you do have on the agenda for at least the discussion here for the 3-week agenda for the Lupton Drive issues on here, we have had a request by the outside counsel for the brownfield agreement to be entered into for the old Lupton City Mill site. I thought that might slow down that process if we couldn't get at least some discussion about that. And that authorizes the mayor to enter into a brownfield voluntary agreement for the development of that site. And I did have that on as an item for our office here. I just added here. That came up at lunchtime and was requested by outside counsel for us to get that at least considered as soon as possible. And that would allow you to move forward on the redevelopment there for the old Lupton Mills site.
And you're saying put that on as a 2-week agenda item next week?
Well, whenever you can get it on there, at least for the look ahead for March the 30th, if possible.
Council, any objection to putting that on the future considerations for March the 30th? Any objections?
No, sir.
I'm not seeing or hearing any objections,
Yes,
Mr. Attorney.
that will help that project move along much quicker, and I think that will be good for the city.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. Councilwoman Burrs.
I guess I have two questions, Mr. Chair. One is
Sure.
for Phil. Phil, and so we're approved to do sort of a bifurcated council meeting, correct?
I believe so. Yes, ma'am.
The governor's not requiring one all the way one way or the other.
I
I
do
think
not
it's a
believe
great
so.
idea, but I didn't know if we were prohibited.
I don't think there's a prohibition. The issue is logistics on how you would accomplish that, I believe.
So the answer is yes. Yeah, we can do it.
Yes,
All right.
ma'am.
And number two, Mr. Chair, the council wants to take, as you know, a really big and active part in budget. And recently, we all received an email whether we wanted a budget notebook or we wanted it in a PDF, which makes me think that the budget is getting ready to get ready. And I've heard nothing, and we need to come up with a schedule so it's not a last minute thing. So if Mara or Daisy or someone could let us know what their projected timelines are, I would appreciate it.
Okay, all right. Let me let me do a little research, and we'll get back with you on that.
Well, I think back with the whole council.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I just don't want to wait till the last minute again. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. Anything else before we go into Public Works? Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to add back to strategic planning the discussion of making Juneteenth a holiday for our city workers. I know we previously discussed it and they threw out numbers and made it feel like, oh, well, we shouldn't do that. But I think it needs to be discussed again.
Okay. Madam Clerk, would you add that to a strategic planning? I will have to look at the schedule to see if we can fit it in next week, but Councilwoman Coonrod, let me ask you this. Are you going to line up the people that we need and move this forward? Is that the reason you're wanting it on the strategic planning?
Yeah, we can discuss it again. If it needs to be discussed, we can put it in. I mean, Phil already drafted the legislation. I think all the council people already have seen it already. If you want to move to put it back on the agenda, however you feel is necessary, Chair. I just think that it is a holiday that need to be recognized. We recognize all the other holidays, and you know, Black people just don't have a holiday to have for us. And I think that, and what's happening across the United States is cities are moving to make that a holiday for city employees in Chattanooga. I think it's time for us to get on board to do the exact same thing, but that's my personal opinion. But again, I'd like for it to be discussed and have the opinions of the council people.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. Anything else we need to address before we go to Public Works? If not, Councilman Mitchell, I am now turning the chair over to you, sir, for a special called Public Works Committee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd ask for approval of minutes.
Vote to approve.
Second.
Anybody against that idea? Don't see any. All right. This special call Public Works and Transportation Committee meeting is about the Vegetation Ordinance as it relates to steep slopes. Hopefully someday we'll put floodways back into it and work on that some too. Might not get there with you, but I'm certainly a believer in it. First of all, though, I'd like to ask Mr. Noblet he was in a meeting with the Stormwater Regulations Board, and they actually discussed recidivism, our ordinance, I believe yesterday. And I would like to start by saying it looks like the Stormwater Board is on board to help us take the steep slopes and floodplains legislation forward in all its different forms and phases. So, Mr. Noblet, can you just give me a brief synopsis of that meeting and see where we go?
Yes, sir. Yesterday, the Mr. Swilly and the Stormwater Board reviewed the items that were in effect involving the recidivism requirements, as you mentioned here in the code. As part of that meeting, we also provided all of the board members at the Stormwater Board with a copy of the vegetative restrictions that we were discussing as well, to be amendments to Chapter 31 of the code. We had both a version for 38 and 31 based upon our discussions with the council last week. The provisions of the ordinance are being reviewed by them. They said they would like to have an opportunity to basically just have a session for a learning session here in connection with that. Mr. Swilly is trying to set that up for them right now. There were no objections yesterday. They just wanted to learn a little bit more about it. They were unanimously yesterday approving the provisions of the recidivism requirements in the code and recommending that to the council as well. So that meeting occurred yesterday. There will be another, review session by them as soon as they can here, but no objections from that body.
All right, thank you. So and I did speak to the acting chair, Mr. Hudson, this morning, and what he has asked for, and they seem to be fine and on board with the recidivism, so we can move forward on that if we choose. The vegetation ordinance, yes, he did ask for a session or a workshop for the board, and I'd like to discuss that with the council if we begin the discussion on vegetation ordinance. I think they want to participate. I think they agree with the idea that we finally got some teeth and something with the appeal process that's in the recidivism. So with that, I'd like to open the discussion about that first, if we could, and then move on to the actual ordinance itself for discussion, if that would be okay with the council. Mr. Henderson.
Okay, so explain to me what is it you're wanting to discuss first exactly?
Well, I would like to, we want to bring the Stormwater Board on up to date. We want them to become an active participant as the future goes forward. But with this vegetation ordinance, so there's a lot of work that's already gone into it. And so I'd like to get away or find a way with the council participation in trying to move that forward with the time we have left in this term, but also take into consideration that the board has some activities that they would like to do to catch up, so to speak.
Okay, some education sessions. So
yeah.
So thinking back, I guess about 6 years ago, I guess when I first came on my first term in council, we passed a stormwater ordinance, but it had I think an effective date of like, 6 months from when we passed it. So I guess, my suggestion, and I think some education session or sessions would be a great idea, not only with the Stormwater Board, but I think all stakeholders that are involved in the vegetation process, in the vegetation ordinance. In other words, those that have to implement it, i.e. the home builders, the realtors, the Association of General Contractors, anybody that would have to implement this ordinance. I think those that have to enforce it need to be in on this as well. And then those that possibly would have to hear appeals, in other words, the Stormwater Board. So hopefully what I would like to see is let's get everybody in the same room at the same time so that we're all on the same page. Those that are going to perform the work, those that are going to enforce the work, and then those that possibly would have to hear the appeals. My suggestion, I would like to see this ordinance go ahead and move forward during this council's time, even if it means putting an activation date of, say, July 1 on the ordinance, so that That would give everybody a build-up time to when this ordinance actually becomes effective. Maybe we can work, hopefully that would give us enough time to work through any of the kinks that perhaps might be in the ordinance. So my suggestion, and Mr. Attorney, I guess that could be made simply by making an amendment, but we could put an activation date on this ordinance of, if we wanted to go ahead and consider it now, put an activation date on it of July 1. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, sir. You can put an effective date when you choose for the ordinance to go into effect. It has to be, unless it's immediate on here, it has to be established as to what your effective date would be. And then if you wish to have some sort of, I guess, training sessions that would occur, you just need to make sure that they all occur before that date. And then if you want to have additional review about other changes you might want to make, you can do that as well.
Okay. I think also in here, we might want to look at something that relates to LDO creating policy as to fines or civil penalties that occur if the ordinance is not followed, at least allowing them to set some kind of limits as well. I'll throw that out for discussion, Mr. Chair, and you can take it from there.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So the two main points, well, actually 3 main points that I'm just kind of trying to repeat. You'd like to see a start date of July 1st so that the persons that are going to be involved with this, either through educating their members or enforcing or hearing appeals, you'd like for training to be held for those folks. And then also what I just heard is, and I got a question for our attorney, Mr. Noblett, yesterday, did they discuss the staff going back and figuring out some policies on fines and things like that as far as the recidivism goes?
Yes, sir. I think they were trying to figure out implementation of how that would work in connection with any type of fines. But the aspect of any fine being approved still would have to go in front of that stormwater board, especially if it's going to result in that entity having to lose its ability to be able to continue to get permits from that point on. And one of the things that I learned in that meeting yesterday is this is a reason for education, because sometimes it's just the property owner that gets one of these permits. It's not an outside contractor there. Property owner may be making that request, and the property owner needs to know the risks that are involved. So that's a good reason for your training sessions that you might have. But a lot of times it is a contractor that is involved that has a substantial amount of assets. Sometimes it is a property owner that doesn't have a lot of assets.
Okay. All right. Did I summarize that okay, Councilman Henderson?
You did, and actually looking at the ordinance at the very bottom, it does have a start date of July 1st. So I guess no amendment would need to be made.
That request was made earlier. I tried to do that for you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Very well. Do you think, Councilman Mitchell, do you think, and talking to the Stormwater Board, would July 1st give them the time that they need to get educated? And
I do, and they were very thankful for that time, and they're excited about this. Of course, we'll see how excited they are when they start hearing appeals. But I felt that they are on board and ready to help us march this forward. So yes, just a quick answer would be yes, I do.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Councilman Ledford.
Chairman, when you're ready to talk about steep slope vegetation component.
We might be there at this point. Are there any more questions or comments on the start date and a process we'll try to follow for getting all the players on board and up to speed, so to speak? And I want to say I would be glad to help facilitate that workshop and that training, and all the way from figuring out who needs to be in on that, from again, the home builders, AGC, the realtors, folks like that, as well as the board themselves. So I'd be glad to facilitate that. A suggestion by Mr. Hudson was that Mr. Swilly run the training, but I think we could also, if he feels he needs more resources, I feel that the council should help him find those resources. And if it costs something, the council takes money out of our budget to pay for it. That's my opinion. And that'll cause some folks to have some different feelings. But is this about the ordinance itself, Mr. Henderson, or is this about what I was just speaking about?
I'm taking my hand down, sir.
Okay. All right. So we're ready. We're ready to proceed to the ordinance itself as it stands now. I think we've got a version. I saw where Councilman Ledford was asking questions of Mr. Noblet. I did print that off that came through a few hours ago and have glanced through it. I don't know if everyone else has had a chance, but I'm going to let Councilman Ledford take the ball at this point and run with it. Councilman.
All right, thank you, Chairman. So everyone, what you have in your inbox was, kind of took some liberty last week. I know that Phil's been busy with several items, so I'll wait for Phil's nod. Phil, did I do a good job at cross-referencing staff comments and marrying them? Good. I might be an attorney one day, so watch out. I'm very
You now
excited.
have 33% everywhere. It's good.
So I'm very excited to hear this in committee. I think that has been a tremendous amount of work done to this point. I know I have spent countless hours learning, researching, listening to staff comments, listening to council comments, and I appreciate each and every one of you. We did marry up those comments to the very best of our ability, and all the green checks that you had previously in your emails were made changes, and on some of that was a lot of strike through. So what I think we were at now is a great first step forward. I'm not going to give you an hour-long spill on why I think it's important. I think we've been hammering this out for, it feels like, 2 years. I do want to talk about what this ordinance does. And for those focused on what it doesn't, I think that's leeway to more conversation as we move. But what this does for us is encourages us to stay away from steep slopes mentality by placing additional vegetation standards that do not exist. And hear stories of the last 4 years, some of the instances and projects that we've been extremely advised on, had this been in place, would not have happened. We would have had fail-safes. We would have had measures and policies in place that would have caught this. And I think that's important to note. This encourages preservation of existing and established trees. This offers property owners a menu of items, allowing an array of vegetation types while encouraging, most importantly, the use of native species. It finally defines what a steep slope is. And I do appreciate the comments from my colleagues to pair up that number to what LDO currently uses. I think that makes complete sense. It allows for the possibility of a credit program for maintaining placement of mature trees. It allows for more ground covering per square foot that's ever been presented. It's something that I think is extremely valuable in the conservation mindset. It creates a formula to provide flexibility, which I think is important too, and a choice while maintaining a focus on square foot coverage, not just trees. But more importantly, this is all coming from the ordinance, so you can read it yourself. This allows the Land Development Office to review a landscape plan submittal prior to an LDP permit issuance. I don't think we have that. I think that's important. I think that the protection of native trees and the planting of new trees and the credit program And the identification of a steep slope is something that we've been missing. I know we've talked a lot about this being on the third phase or the post-construction, but it actually, if you look at item 8, it actually helps identify a steep slope up front, and I think is a very important component. Some of the changes that I have been working with Phil on, and I appreciate the Chairman Henderson's comments about July 1, that if you'll read in section 4, I agree, and I've already added in a July 1 start date to allow for staff concerns resolving in their concerns for training. So we have there. Then also with experience in legislation and on this council, I've learned that a year process, putting a review in there is also important. We need to have the ability to come back and look at this just as we have done with, say, for example, short-term vacation rentals. And I think that putting that process in there for a trigger automatic review is also important to see where we're at, to see what needs to be addressed, and to see where it's working. And hopefully, to borrow a phrase from my esteemed colleague, Dr. Burrs, to show its impact. And I think that it will make a difference in a lot of concerns that were brought to our attention. Is it perfect? No, we've already said that a million times. So it's not the magic pill. It's a great step forward. Hundreds of man hours have gone into looking at this and its impact. I would respectfully request that with these changes that this come out of committee unanimously and be placed on the agenda as soon as possible in order for this council to enact on it.
Thank you, Councilman. Well, let's see. Councilperson Burrs.
She's muted.
I would like to second my esteemed colleague and see that it be placed on the agenda for future implementation, but we need to bring closure to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Henderson.
I would like to see the vegetation ordinance and the recidivism ordinance be placed on the agenda as well.
All right, I hear wants. Does anybody have any dates in mind to help our attorney?
What's our first available, Phil?
Well, I think to put it on the 2-week agenda, well, if we could put it on the 30th.
That's what I was thinking.
That would give us a March the 30th vote and then a April 6th vote.
I'm good with that.
Good.
And it gives people 2 weeks to weigh in.
Anybody have any negative thoughts about that, or is everyone okay with putting them both on the agenda for March 30th?
I'm good with it. I think that's a great idea, putting it on the 30th.
All right. I just have a question, and it's not, don't do it on the 30th. It's about, okay, we're about to do something that could serve as a template as the next council moves forward, as far as training and educational sessions go. When we get all these folks in a room, and all these folks, representatives of the organizations that would need to educate their members, and then of course the board itself, along with the enforcement folks participating also. As they work through this training, let's say something comes up and there are suggestions of what could make this a little bit better. And I really like the idea of it being a law before we give access to that, but it's another step to where people can have input to this law. What would be our process? Are we going to say, okay, we'll consider that in a year? Or are we going to, or with again, this is a question for the next council, I guess, to answer as much as this one. But what process would we follow if things come out of those sessions that say it would be better if this would be changed? Councilman Henderson.
So, and Councilman Ledford mentioned the short-term vacation rental. One of the things that I wrote into that ordinance was an automatic review in a year, which we could write an automatic review in a year with this ordinance as well, so that we sort of are forced to take a look at it in a year. And it could be a year from the effective date or from the year of passage, either one, really.
Okay, Councilman Ledford.
You're welcome to use section 4 from the steep slopes ordinance, which covers both those concerns.
All right, that sounds good. And hopefully the next council will continue. We've got a couple more phases out there they need to address or the council needs to address. And while that's happening, some other things could occur also simultaneously, I would say. So, all right, do we have something unanimous that says it goes on the agenda March 30th for first reading?
I'm good.
Good.
I don't see any heads going this way. That's good. That's good. Okay. All right, Mr. Chair, do you want to give the instructions to the attorney, or do you want me to?
Sir, you're the chair of the Public Works Committee.
All right, Mr. Attorney, let's have this first reading for both of these ordinances on the 30th of March.
Yes, sir. Get them on.
And thank you very much, Council, especially Councilman Ledford, for your work. I know Councilman Henderson, you've tried to keep it in the middle of the road and keep my goats out of it. And you've done a great job with that. So I guess with that, this special called Public Works and Transportation Committee meeting is over, and I'll turn it back over to the chair.
All right. Thank you, Councilman Mitchell. Great job. And Councilman Ledford, glad to see this finally get over the finish line. I don't think, unless someone has something else that they would like to address this council, we really don't have anything else this afternoon. Councilman Oglesby, let me circle back with you, sir. On the process for fee waivers, would it be possible for you to set up a committee meeting for us to address this, and I'd say the near future? Obviously, we need to address this particular one that's on the 3-week agenda. Councilman?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to sponsor it. I would be happy to conduct a ECD meeting on March the 30th to address this, so we can get it done sooner rather than later. We're getting ready to move into the summer months, and hopefully we'll be opening back up. And I anticipate a lot of requests, so that we get ahead of the curve, so to speak, and work out what needs to be done on whether we waive fees or not, or the process to do so would be fine. So I would be happy to host one on March the 30th, if that pleases the council.
All right, Madam Clerk, would you put that on our agenda for March the 30th ECD committee meeting? And Councilman Oglesby, the ball is now in your court, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, with no other business that needs to be brought before the council, we will adjourn our agenda session. We'll see everybody back at 6 o'clock.
Thank you.